Battle Report with Ben and Steve.
This game is bullshit.
What? Go
It
on
is
then.
already
Go on.
bullshit.
Go on.
I support
You're popping on the microphone, sorry. Could you pull back a bit?
votes for women.
Of course you do. It's
Do you-
2020 fucking 3.
Yeah, I support that. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I mean, we've seen some regression over the past couple of years, but that would be incredibly regressive now.
Yeah, but the thing is, we randomly determined that you are going to play as the suffragists,
It's-
and I'm the opposition.
It's because the dice recognise that I'm the moral good in this
Yeah,
game.
are you or are you not in favor of votes for women?
I am in favour of vote to women.
And so, with this game configuration,
Yeah.
are the women likely to win the vote?
That is unfortunate.
Ben, you're not good at games.
But unfortunate. But
What am I going to have to throw this?
But the thing is, though, Steve, right? This is a game.
I'm the opposition. You're this. Like,
So let's go back.
like by the time this game is over, nobody's going to have votes.
So let's go back, right? We're looking at the suffrage struggle. I'm going to use the British example because I don't know anything about the American example. I will after this game, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think we invented votes for women, didn't we?
Oh, definitely, it's an American thing. Yeah.
Fun fact: I believe New Zealand was the first country to give women the vote.
Do you know?
Do you have any listeners in New Zealand?
I'm sure we have a couple. If you're from New Zealand, say hello.
Can you differentiate between a New Zealand and an Australian accent?
Yes, when I hear it, absolutely.
Can you do it?
No.
Can you try?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Give me a sentence.
I think women should get the vote, mate.
Flaming Hill. I think women should get the vote, mate.
So that's Australian, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now New Zealand.
Flaming Hill. I think women should get the vote, mate.
And now South African.
Flaming hell. I think women should get the vote, mate.
It's amazing. I don't know why you don't get more voiceover work.
Do you know, did you think...
Man of 1,000 voices, Ben Maddox.
Quite shouting, you're going to pop on the mic there.
God,
So,
you really make this such an enjoyable experience for me. I've listened to the recordings. It doesn't fucking matter.
So-
you don't hear anything.
do you think, right, if you'd have closed your eyes while I did that,
Yeah.
you'd have been thinking, bloody hell, where did
Fucking
Ben,
Sam Neill is in the room with me
where
right
did
now.
Ben get an Australian, a New Zealander, and a South African
Yeah.
just to pop in, just to do those one line?
Yeah, because
you think the listeners-
I'm sure you don't have that many friends.
Do you think the listeners were suddenly like, bloody hell, mate?
Yeah.
Like the Australians were going, bloody hell, mate.
Yeah.
And the New Zealanders were going, bloody hell, mate.
Yeah, we've got Paul Hogan, Sam Neill, and someone from South Africa.
Russell Crowe is interestingly New Zealandy.
Yes, he
Everyone
is.
thinks he's Australian, but
Yep.
he's from New Zealand.
He is.
Do you think Peter Jackson is listening to this going, bloody hell, mate? It's a great accent, mate. Sound exactly right. You know what I mean?
That sounds a bit more Australian than New Zealand.
I can hear the difference. I can't do the difference.
I think maybe New Zealanders sound like Australians with a bit of a cold.
I knew someone from South Africa, and there's one thing people always get wrong with the accent.
Yeah.
You don't say South Africa.
South Africa.
No, it's wrong.
What do you say?
South Africa.
South Africa. South Africa.
I'm from South Africa.
In New Zealand, you'd be bin.
I'd be bin. Yeah.
Bin.
Yeah.
Bin.
Anyway, so, yeah, as I was saying, right, like Emmeline Pankhurst, right? She's looking for someone to sort of marshal...
Who?
Emmeline Pankhurst. She was the woman who led women's suffrage in Britain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. You have the vote in Britain? I thought like the king just decides what to do.
Well, the thing is in Britain, you see.
Yeah. You have like dukes and
So
shit.
everyone...
Do you or do you not have like an entire chamber of the government full of like lords and whatever?
We have the Lord's spiritual and the Lord's temporal, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the Middle Ages.
So, I mean, very much so. But, you know, so say... whatchamafladget, what am I talking about?
Can the Lord's temporal control time?
Yeah, that's right.
Fuck me.
So, I'm trying to fucking do a point here.
Are you?
So the thing is...
Are you? Is it hard for you to make your point?
It is, because
God, I never have this experience on this
collaborative
fucking podcast.
overlap. You and your fucking collaborative overlap.
You got it right this time. It's collaborative overlap.
Yeah, anyway, so the thing is in Britain, we have ostensibly a democracy, but actually what it is, we vote for people and then they just fucking reduce labour rights and make people even poorer.
So why is your country called a United Kingdom?
Yeah, well, it's a constitutional monarch. It's not an absolute monarch.
Constitutional monarchy.
Yeah.
But you don't have a constitution.
Unwritten constitution. We do have a constitution. It's just unwritten.
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, you know.
That's a paradox. What is an unwritten constitution?
What Britain has.
I think that you have some kind of weird political arrangement that's entirely designed to operate according to convention, and that convention simply keeps people in power who have always been in power.
That convention is to keep the Tories in power, raking in the money.
Yeah, exactly. And I gotta say,
this is a fucking sharp political podcast now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think we'll be
the
challenging
acumen?
Do you think we'll be challenging Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart?
Absolutely not. I mean, maybe for the number 2 spot.
Right. Exactly.
Number 1 is like well in the lead though. So
anyway, so Emmeline Pankhurst, right back in the day,
yeah,
she's looking for someone to sort of lead the sort of strategy behind the women's suffrage movement.
Yeah.
And she's got like
what year?
Like just after the First World War, I think.
So well later than the era in which this game is set?
1920. It goes up to 1920.
Yeah, but the suffrage movement in America begins in 1848.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the British suffrage movement started at a similar time.
It's an important year in European history.
That's right. Great, sharp. When we play in 1848...
Paris Commune, I guess. And Italian, Risorgimento.
Yeah.
That's like 1870, isn't it? Something happened.
I've read a book.
Germany, Bismarck.
Do people just like...
God, people prepare for this, don't they?
Do people just like evaporate from you in the pub?
Well, from me for that reason, from you for different reasons.
Because I'm just too darn musky.
Yeah, that must be it. And yet, look, we ended up together.
Exactly.
Because nobody can stand to be around either of us.
Exactly. So Emmeline Pankhurst, she's like, I need a strategist. And like, if we're back in the day and I rock up and go, all right, Emmeline, I reckon we should go out on that and maybe have a couple of pints and that. That'd be great. Women aren't getting suffrage, right? Women aren't getting suffrage.
The guy with that voice gets to vote.
That's me. But
you don't even get to vote in the UK.
I don't have suffrage.
Yeah, this is like
I have no suffrage anywhere.
I was horrified when I learned this. That if you leave the United
13
Kingdom,
years I think it is.
Like normally you would go and you stick your thumb in the ink and then make your mark under the observation of the local duke, so he makes sure that you vote correctly.
Yeah.
But if you leave the kingdom for like how many years?
13 years, I think.
You lose the right to vote.
I couldn't vote
to make your little
Brexit.
X.
Yeah, I do an X because I can't read or write.
All the Americans listening to this right now should be horrified by this.
They should be horrified. I have no suffrage. I am stateless.
I still get to vote in the U.S. forever.
I know.
It's sacrosanct.
Donald Trump sent you $1,000 through the post.
Yeah, Biden sent me another $1,000.
Did he?
Yeah, we got 2 checks. 2 checks mailed to Germany.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, what did you get in the pandemic?
Sweet Fanny Adams, love. Sweet Fanny Adams, who was probably a suffragist.
I assume that means not much.
But what I was trying to get at is back in the day, Emmeline Pankhurst wouldn't have hired me as a strategist.
Yeah.
So that, if I was strategist for the women's suffrage movement back in the day, that would have import. The fact that I'm running the women's suffrage movement in this board game is of less import, I would say.
To be sure, but since we're on the topic, I have to say that I have mixed feelings about the theme for an entirely different reason.
Go on in.
And you should understand, coming from the UK.
That's right.
I mean, I'm not sure anybody should have the vote. I mean, look where democracy has gotten us lately. Brexit, Donald Trump, probably Donald Trump again.
Are you doing this to be down with the kids? Because all the kids really want an authoritarian strongman. Both the left and the right seem to want an authoritarian strongman.
You know what? I think I'm warming to the idea. We just can't be trusted with democracy. Look at the choices we're making. Look what's happening. All of the retrograde motion in society is entirely due to giving people like this weird fucking power of the plebiscite.
But the plebiscite's cool, isn't it? It's cool, the plebiscite, for a start.
I mean, it's working really well for the people who are able to like manipulate the people into supporting their continued dominance over the structures of power, Ben. Is that what you're about, Ben?
Did you know there's some fucking crazy statistic that like the Labour Party held power in the 20th century in Britain for something like 22 years.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent 78 years with the fucking Tories.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Look at this country. Berlin, the most left city that you can imagine.
Just voted a conservative government in. This is fucking unprecedented.
We're going to have a conservative mayor in Berlin.
Unbelievable.
So I don't suppose we're going to be revisiting our relationship with the automobile anytime soon?
No.
Or corporate power?
No.
Or the dominance of finance capitalism?
No, we're not going to be talking about that, are we? I watched an interesting video.
Oh, but at least we can vote. vote for who? Who do we get to vote for? Who are the alternatives?
Same party.
They're all the same,
Same
Ben.
financial backers. Same games. Same everything, Steve. Who was I quoting there?
I don't know who.
I was quoting Jello Biafra from a Dead Kennedys concert.
That's very good. How do you come up with these references?
Well,
Like, what's going on in there?
If you notice my references, if I watched something when I was like 14 or 15,
Yeah.
still in there, baby.
What happened between the... Oh, okay.
If
Yeah.
I fucking watched-
I got it.
if it's from the last 2 days, not a bloody chance.
Yeah.
Not a chance.
Yeah, so between your middle teenage years and now, there were certain like habits that you developed that forestalled the creation of new memories.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I got
so,
the point. Yeah.
I got an interesting question for you, right?
Yeah.
Do you think so I think
Do I think voting matters? I think it's an interesting question.
that wasn't the question I was going to ask.
I mean, I think it's important that we have the right to vote
Doesn't even
and that
matter,
everybody
I'll
has
just
it.
fucking ask anything.
Does
I
it really
could have
does
asked
it
anything if you got a small
does it
penis,
really
you just fucking gone
cause
and talked
change
about-
in our
you just
society?
gone and
I'm not
talked
so
about
sure
whatever you
about that. I
wanted.
mean, some people would say that it's simply like a symbolic, and it doesn't really evince true political power or influence simply to vote. I mean, many people they vote and they don't do anything else. They don't participate in society. They don't engage civically, and that's what we need people to do. We need people to like stand for office, not simply show up to the ballot box once every 4 years. Once every 4 years, Ben, they don't even go to off-year elections because these elections don't matter. They only vote for the president, the election over which they have the least suasion whatsoever, and they think that they've done their bit. They've participated. They stood in line. They got their little sticker and they made a difference. But really, they didn't make a difference. And you know what? The incumbency rate is like over 90%. So what are we really changing simply by voting, Ben?
Anyway, so my question was, so I think we both agree. So don't be ironic just for a second. must say the opposite of what I actually think. So I think we both agree that, women's suffrage was a necessary change, and it was massively unjust that women didn't have suffrage for as long as they did. So I think we can both agree on that. But, so do you think, now I don't know, we haven't played this game, so I can't say, but when you've got something that is so obviously a social right, like women's suffrage, right? There's no debate on it. Both the left and the right, I think are pretty unanimous on it. Do you think a game like this should spin a narrative of the modern prevailing idea that obviously women should have suffrage? Or do you think a game like this would transport us back to the time where there were intelligent people who genuinely had arguments, whether they were valid or not, against women's suffrage? Do you think it should present both sides? I'm not saying it doesn't, because I don't know, we haven't played it. Or should the perspective be from the obvious received wisdom of the modern age?
I think it's a difficult question to answer. I think an analogous question would be, if you were in a debating society today, would this be a legitimate topic for like forensics? Should women have the right to vote? I would say no.
No, of course
definitely not. It's settled, and I don't think there's anything really interesting to debate about. I don't even think there are any first principles that you could return to make any kind of case whatsoever.
I mean,
it's not a contemporary debate,
right? In a debating,
like abortion.
Well, indeed,
settled law.
So yeah. So, I mean, I don't know.
But to me, this game, I have no idea about the game. First of all, I want to say it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
This is a beautifully designed game, and that has very little to do with the game, but it's very inviting.
It is.
It has already, to me, some of the flavor, just sort of like looking at the materials and the cards, it has some of the flavor of Twilight Struggle. And you could ask a similar question. I mean, am I going to consider the Soviet point of view in Twilight Struggle?
Well, Twilight Struggle is very neutral in its very neutral in its viewpoint, right?
Yeah, I suppose like the history itself isn't terribly neutral.
Sure, but Twilight Struggle, and I'm sure there were people listening to this who've played Twilight Struggle a lot more than me, would say, don't be silly, it's clearly not. But
and they will have no problem going on Twitter at 5 games for Doomsday, telling you what they think.
Having spoken to Jason Matthews, he admitted that some of his biases crept into it, but he attempted to paint it as an historical event from a neutral viewpoint as much as possible. But Twilight Struggle was made 20 years ago. This is a contemporary game where people are expected to evince their political views on everything all the time.
I see
And
what you mean,
I don't know. So I want to caveat this by saying we haven't played the game, so I have no idea. And so my question is, do you think that this should be a game that should evince a political viewpoint, or do you think it's a game that should go for a neutral representation of what happened at the time?
I think that as an artifact that is, I assume, purporting to teach more about a particular important era of history, it probably can't, shouldn't, and won't evince this neutral point of view, but will sort of teach us how we got to where we are now, like a better place than where we were before. I think it's very interesting to create a game like this that can serve as such a teaching tool. Like, I don't think the topic is necessarily like woke or anything like that.
I don't think it is.
Not of the moment. I think there are. I mean, I have no idea what these materials are for, but I see that the game comes with some like very interesting looking facsimiles of historical documents, and I think like when you teach history, you are inevitably teaching it from a certain point of view, like the point of view of like historical subjects living at a time that is the consequence of everything that came before, and you're telling a certain narrative. We sometimes call this like the Whig interpretation of history.
Right.
Not everybody teaches it this way, but I think this is like the most typical naive way of teaching history.
I'm not sure the Whig interpretation is naive necessarily.
Well, this idea of like relentless progress.
Yeah.
I am saying it's naive.
Well, especially considering that we live for so short a time, we can only ever look at the past to denote results, because the present, we could be a very small, at the moment we could be in a very small dip on an upward trajectory, right, and just not know it because we will never know because we don't live long enough.
Yeah, I mean, we as our historical subjects ourselves, we can hardly not be conditioned by the societies in which we live, in which we have certain values that derive from like all of the historical events that occurred before, including women gaining the right to vote. It would be weird for us to think otherwise. There are probably some people who do. Many historians don't believe in this idea of progress, and they would attempt to be more objective and focus on like very, very like small eras in history, or maybe
it seems to me
look for like longer.
It seems to me since we
longer term changes.
I think since we unburdened ourselves with the shackles of the Abrahamic faith in the West, we've had sort of unprecedented progress, right?
I mean, it depends how you look at progress. I mean, it depends what you want to measure and what's important to you. I mean, I think from like an American or European point of view, lots of things could look like progress, but many historians would probably not want to tell this kind of story, not want to tell this kind of narrative. Sure. If for any other reason, then history, like any other academic discipline, tends to create a lot of hyper specialists,
right,
who don't tell these kinds of narratives except in like, intro courses at university.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing is, it's interesting because I think the for want of a better term, woke perspective would be, and I don't know if the game has this, I assume it won't have, but the woke perspective would be to assert that very little progress has been made since the instantiation of suffrage for women, because a lot of sort of modern left-wing ideas are based upon how much you can leverage your own particular brand of suffering. I'm hoping the game is an interesting investigation into the struggles of the time. And while I don't think... The thing is, I think if you're trying to leverage sympathy for the opposition view, I think it's an impossible task, because it's clearly so absurd that anyone should have opposition to suffrage for women. But I think it would... I'm hoping that...
Even that we think that is the product of like historical circumstances. Like there are plenty of countries today where, like, do women have the right to vote in Saudi Arabia?
I don't know. Do they?
I don't think anybody does, because it's a kingdom and it's like an autocracy. I don't think they have like voting there.
Do they not? I don't know.
No, I think there are loads of countries where there isn't such a thing as voting or suffrage for anybody.
Well,
but like we come from Western democracies, Western liberal democracies that have all decided to exchange amongst each other this idea of ever expanding freedom for all. And even in my country, this began as freedom for a very small stratum of society,
sure.
Like
same
wealthy,
as in Britain.
Yeah, like wealthy landowning men. And then gradually we have like expanded the franchise over time. And like the power of this idea has even spread across the ocean to other countries. We've carried it around with us. It has yet to become universal throughout the world. And it's had its complications and setbacks. And I'm sure, and I don't know if this game will explore it, there were women at the time who were against the idea of votes for women.
Sure.
And you could say that they had some kind of
Stockholm syndrome.
false consciousness that they were suffering from, or as legitimate historical actors in their own right. They believe this idea that they would just end up voting for, without economic freedom, most women would just vote for whomever their husbands voted for.
But of course,
and what's the difference?
To assert that people can't be wrong based on unalterable characteristics is in and of itself infantilizing.
I think the real question, Ben, is what is going to be ultimately in the final telling more interesting, this game or this conversation between you and me?
You can listen to the rest of this show and hundreds of hours of bonus content, including convention reports, in-game bickering, and loads more at patreon.com/5G4D.